All right, this is a very special moment. I have a very, very special guest on today's podcast, Mr. Ritchie Torres, Congressman to United States government. Thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here.
And I've been chasing your people for about a week now because I've been seeing the incredible work that you've been putting out on the internet. Just really a beacon of light, a beacon of hope for us, for the Jewish people. I want to let you know the title of what I want to call this podcast, which is a heart-to-heart between Ritchie Torres and the Jewish community, because that's really what I think that we need right now. Is we feel as a community, although, by the way, I will admit that Congress as a whole has been very, very supportive, and really impressed to see the debates that are going on, really impressed to see the overwhelming support. But nonetheless, sometimes we feel lonely, and especially going through our feeds. And when we see somebody like yourself, who is not Jewish, who is standing with us, it really warms our heart. And that's really the blanket of what I want to call our talk today, a heart-to-heart between the Jewish community and Ritchie Torres. So I want to just ask you a couple questions. Why are you doing it? Why now? Why you standing up? Why you're making your voice heard? I would love to hear.
The simple answer is that it's the right thing to do.
You know, I knew you were going to say that, by the way.
Well, the proper question is not why. The proper question is why not. You know, there were Jews like Michael Schwerner and Andrew Goodman who put their lives at risk, who were murdered in the Mississippi burning so that people who looked like me could have the right to vote. And I feel strongly that one of the lessons of history is that we all have an obligation to fight extremism, to fight racism, to fight anti-Semitism. And that moral obligation is not only based on the particularity of our identity, it's based on something universal, which is our common humanity. And so I speak out against anti-Semitism because it is the right thing to do, because it is a defense not only of the Jewish community, but of our common humanity.
And, you know, we appreciate that more than you can know. You know, I guess after thousands of years of persecution, we look at people who stand up for us and we're like, why are you doing it? One of the things that we say to people when they're converting to Judaism is we say to them, if you're being persecuted by the Germans or by whoever it is that, you know, of the time, of the day, will you stand as a Jew or not? And it's so ingrained in our culture. Not that I want to paint us as victims because we're so much more than that, but it's just something that has always been a part of our history. So have you gotten, I saw AOC a few weeks ago, you know, she mentioned you by name at a rally, at a conference, and she called you out by name, and your moral clarity is so strong. Where does that come from? Does it come from your parents? Does it come from your religious upbringing? Where does your guiding light come from?
Well, I was not aware that she called me out by name, so that's interesting.
I'll send you the clip.
I would be here to see it. Although I suspect, I think you're referring to Representative Ilhan Omar.
Sorry. Yes. Correct. Yes.
Which I did see.
Yes.
I don't. You know, my moral clarity comes from my upbringing. You know, I've spent almost all my life in poverty, and I was raised by a single mother who had to raise three of us on minimum wage, which in the 1990s was $4.25 in New York City.
Wow.
And I grew up in molded and leaking conditions in public housing. And so I've had enough suffering in my life to have empathy for the plight not only of my own people, but communities beyond my own. So I feel like I have an empathy that's deeply rooted in my own lived experience. But then part of it is common sense. You know, common sense tells me that butchering babies is morally wrong. It's morally abhorrent, and that every person has an obligation to condemn it. And what I find on college campuses, what I find among academics and activists, is the suspension of critical thinking and common sense. And, I feel the United States is the greatest country on earth, but not even a country as great as the United States can survive the loss of moral common sense.
Well said. Do you mind if I ask you your religious background or beliefs?
So I am not a particularly religious person. I would describe myself as culturally Christian. I have alternated between Catholicism and Protestantism, but I'm part of the cultural tradition that is the Abrahamic tradition or the Judeo-Christian tradition. But my Zionism is not based on religion at all.
Interesting.
My Zionism is based on a study of history. I think when you are a student of history, you realize that there has been a long and ugly pattern of oppression against Jews. There's been a long and ugly history of exile and pogroms and inquisitions and crusades and genocide and ethnic cleansing. And I feel like a proper study of history enables us to see clearly the moral and historical necessity of Israel as a Jewish state. So, there are people for whom support for Israel is central to their faith. I am not one of those people. My Zionism is historically rooted.
Interesting. And would you say that you're a person that believes in God?
I haven't believed in God yet.
Very nice. So what message, I guess, would you give to the Jewish community who right now feels isolated, feels under attack? I'm originally from Montreal. My sister sent me two clips from the news yesterday that two schools were come under fire. They shot at two schools early yesterday morning and late last night. Two different schools, two different Jewish schools. Everything that's going on campus. What message would you give to the Jewish community that is scared right now? A lot of Jews are questioning their future in America right now.
My message to the Jewish community is never lose hope. Never lose hope. There's no doubt in my mind that the Jewish community and the Jewish state will emerge from this tragedy better and stronger, more resilient and more resourceful than ever before. Like, resilience is both the DNA and destiny of the Jewish people. It's the DNA and destiny of the Jewish state. And everyone should have supreme confidence that Israel will live on for the next 75 years and beyond. Am Israel High.
I wish as many Jews had as much what we would call bitachon as you, which means trust that everything is going to be okay.
But we cannot take it for granted. We have to act to shape the world in the image of our ideals. But there are few communities that can do it as powerfully and as effectively as the Jewish community. So never lose faith in your own resilience.
It's humbling and inspiring, and it makes me want to be a better person listening to you speak, because I want to be there for other communities, for your community, for other communities in their times of need, just like you are there for our community in our time of need. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing.
We should just, for me, it's simple. Just do what's right. Do what you feel is right. This is not a quid pro quo. This is not a transaction. Like, do right by every community, including your own, but beyond your own, because in the end, we're part of the same human family. And morality, moral common sense transcends particular cultures and particular societies. It is universal. What Hamas did to Israel was a crime against humanity itself. And it was a crime so barbaric that it cannot be ignored. It cannot go unpunished. Hamas must be brought to justice. And I will defend unequivocally Israel's right to defend itself and to bring Hamas to justice and rid the world of its terror.
Thank you for that. What are you hearing in the halls of Congress regarding the subject?
Look, rhetorically, Congress is supportive of Israel. Right? The overwhelming majority of members of Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, are rhetorically supportive of Israel. But for me, there is a disconnect between the reality and the rhetoric.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that Congress is playing political games, and that Congress has spent more time censuring members of Congress about Israel than actually providing aid to Israel. And we're not acting like a serious institution. Like tomorrow, today, if the speaker would have put on the floor a standalone bill providing aid to Israel with no poison pills, it would pass almost unanimously in both the House and the Senate.
Wow.
That could happen today. But what stands in the way of that kind of overwhelming show of unity is politics. Petty politics in a time, and the practice of politicizing Israel in a time of war is disgraceful. And so what we need from Congress is not gamesmanship, but statesmanship.
I guess you're referring to Congresswoman Tlaib, that they voted to censor her. Did it go through in the end?
And I voted for it.
You voted? I saw.
I
saw.
Voted for it. I was
right.
But I feel like we should be prioritizing providing aid to Israel in a time of war.
We have an expression in Yiddish. It's called tuchis on the tish. It means get your butt on the table, which means stop playing games and do what has to get done. And I see, I didn't look at it from that perspective. I guess you're in it, and you're knee deep in it. So you understand the political aspect of it. From my perspective on my social media, I was like, yeah, it would have win. But what you're saying is what would have been more effective is let's get the bill passed and let's play politics later.
That's my view.
Because that's the stance that Israel is taking right now. So in the beginning, a lot of people were pointing fingers. How could it be? How could there be a security breach? How could we have missed it? How could we? And everyone just put down the politics for a minute and said, let's focus on the task at hand. And I think that's why we're seeing that decisive action from the Israeli government right now.
Are we here to feel good, or are we here to do good?
I like it.
And I would prefer to do good for Israel than debate and pass feel-good legislation or resolutions that have no real-world effect.
That's very interesting. So let's go to you for a moment, yeah? I want my viewers to know a little bit more about you personally. What's your long-term aspirations? I mean, you're a young guy. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 35, which is only young by congressional standards.
Okay, 35.
I'm a gerontocracy.
Right. I'm also 35 years old. So you're a young guy. You have your whole life ahead of you, and you're probably one of the youngest people in Congress right now. So
I have one colleague who's almost a decade younger than I am, but I am in the top 5 or 10.
Right. Which I love walking into a room and they call me, hey kid, come over here. Yeah, it's a great feeling. So I guess what's your aspirations? What are your goals? What are your dreams? What are your hopes? What does your future look like?
I take it one day at a time. My philosophy is that if you overcalculate, if you overthink the politics, if you put the politics ahead of the governing, it will ultimately backfire. And so my role is to be as effective a congressman as I can be. And if you govern effectively, then maybe, people will want to see you graduate to the next level, whatever that level might be. But I refuse to calculate like 20, 30, 40 steps ahead, because when you do so, it has a distorting effect on your decision making.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then the question you're asking yourself is not whether you're doing the right thing, but whether you're doing what is best for your political ambitions. And if I had that kind of mindset, maybe I would not be as pro-Israel as I am. Right? Because to be blunt, I am not clear that the position that I've taken will benefit me politically. I could be planting the seeds of my own decline. But there are moments in life when you have to do what you think is right, where you have to stand for what is right, even if it means standing alone, and even if it means sacrificing your career. And so I prefer to think morally and governmentally rather than politically.
What you're saying is so aligned with the Jewish thought process. There was a moment in history where there was one man named Abraham. The whole world knows about him. And the whole world was on one side. They were on the side of idolatry, the side of immorality, adultery, and paganism. And here came one man, and it was extremely politically incorrect to say that there's one God. And he was thrown into a furnace because of it. And they tried to kill him, and his own father disowned him, but he did what was right, what he felt was right. And politically, it was not a strong move. But we see that when a person sticks to their convictions, even when it's not popular, but they believe it to be true, then ultimately that truth will carry them all the way through, and they'll be able to influence so many more in that way. So what you're saying is so in line with Jewish values.
Look, I feel like you have to lead by example. And I came to Congress to be a leader rather than a follower.
That was one of the questions I asked you, by the way. Your people had asked me to submit some sample questions before the interview, and one of the questions I had asked you, which you had just answered, was, are you scared that your stance on Israel will hurt your political career? And I guess you answered that. You're saying you're not in it for the political career; you're in it to do what's right.
And it likely will cost me, because the next generation of Americans have been increasingly indoctrinated with a hatred for Israel.
Well, I have good news for you. The good news is the Torah also says that whoever blesses the Jewish people is blessed, and whoever curses the Jewish people is cursed. And I promise you this, is that God sees everything that you're doing. He appreciates everything that you're doing. He appreciates your light. He appreciates your clarity, your honesty, and he will not let your feet falter. That is guaranteed. You can't lose. You can't lose when you're on God's side. And I don't want you to worry about that for a second, because you're going to be just fine. He's going to take care of you.
Well, this might be a moment when you're more optimistic than I am.
I spoke to my rabbi when this whole thing started. And I said, I'm scared. I said, I think, this might be it. Maybe. So before we wrap it up, I want to ask you, Do you have any Orthodox Jewish friends, by the way?
I have plenty of them.
Do you? I'm sure you do now.
Many of my closest friends are Orthodox.
That's so interesting. How did that happen?
Obviously, the commitment to Israel is a common thread, but I like to think I'm a good person whose company is bearable, and
I could attest that your company is relatively bearable. Yes,
maybe it's because I'm Jewish. I don't. One of my rabbis in Riverdale, Abi Weiss, renamed me Ritchie Torres.
That's so funny. That's so funny. You're definitely an honorary member of the tribe, 100%. You're welcome to my house for Shabbat anytime you want, okay? You're in.
I feel like I have a Shabbat every week for the rest of my life.
That's so funny.
I'm covered.
That's so funny. That's so funny. And what's your do you have any questions for me? I'm curious. Everything's on the table. Orthodox Jewish wise. Everything's on the table.
What else can public officials like myself and ordinary people, non-Jews, to support the Jewish community in this moment?
You know, it's such a nice question. It's one that I haven't even processed, because I was going to ask you the same question, which is, what could we do in this moment? I think a lot of people are scared to speak up right now. My business partner is one of them. He's a Greek Orthodox Christian, and he was under a lot of pressure to be quiet, because a lot of his circles are pro-Hamas. As crazy as those words sound. And I said to him at a certain point, I'm like, hey, dude, we're getting clobbered out there. If you're not going to say something, who's going to say something? And he's like, you're so right. He's like, I've been scared to, ruin relationships or to put something out there, and I think that we need a voice. We need a voice. We're so small. There's 15 million of us. We're so small. Have you ever seen those videos of those guys walking around on the streets of New York asking, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? And one guy says 500 million, 100 million, 250,000. And no, there's 15 million, and they can't believe how that could be possible. We're so small that we need people to have a voice. And even if you don't support Jews or the state of Israel, at least don't support the next best thing, which is Hamas. And make your stance known, even if that will cause you to lose a few followers, because the few followers that the people will lose will pale in comparison to the base that they will gain. Your base right now, Ritchie, Congressman Torres, sorry. Your base right now is so rock solid, at least your Jewish base, I can't speak for anybody else, is so rock solid for you. And I'm happy to help anytime that you need to rally that base. By the way, most of my followers are in New York. Most of them are Orthodox Jewish. If you ever need us for anything, we are there 1,000,000% toe-to-toe with you, shoulder to shoulder. So to answer your question, you don't have to be pro-Israel and pro-Jewish. You like us, you don't like us. Not every Jew is perfect. Most are, but most aren't. Is just be anti-Hamas. Be against Hamas. And the Jews will figure themselves out. But don't create a moral comparison between the two. I think that's what I would say.
For me, this is not about this is not only about the Jewish community in Israel, this is about human decency. And if we cannot summon the courage, the moral courage, to condemn barbarism and terrorism with moral clarity, then we're lost.
Yes.
We're lost. We're going to rot from within. We are rotting from within.
What do you think happened? What do you think happened since 9/11 until today? Meaning 9/11 happened and there was zero tolerance for this type of behavior. And now there seems to be a tolerance. Not only a tolerance, there seems to be a righteousness behind this type of behavior, this type of cause. What do you think happened from then until now?
The greatest difference between then and now is social media and academia, which has undergone a transformation. I said earlier that I worry about the next generation of Americans being indoctrinated with a hatred for Israel. The process of anti-Israel indoctrination is largely unfolding on social media platforms and on college campuses. And those are the two drivers of anti-Semitism that are much more pronounced today than they were 2 decades ago. And I'm gonna have to go because I have a 1 o'clock.
Yes. We're already 6 minutes over. Congressman Torres, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your heart-to-heart with the Jewish community. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. We appreciate everything you're doing. I want to leave you with a blessing. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob should continue to bless you, your family, your career, your health, your children, your children's children, and protect you and guide you and be with you and allow you to continue doing your great work and spreading your great light in this world. And you should continue to be a shining example for everybody around you.
God bless you.
Have a great day. Thank you.